Welcome back to the Sleepy Stoic sanctuary, where ancient wisdom meets modern rest. Tonight, we witness the greatest act of service in all mythology, the story of a divine being who chose eternal suffering rather than watch humanity struggle in darkness. I am your guide through the realm of ancient Greek wisdom, and tonight we explore the tale of Prometheus, whose name means forethought, the titan who saw what humanity could become and sacrificed everything to make that vision possible. This is not merely a story about stealing fire from the gods. This is the foundational tale of principled defiance, of choosing service to others over personal safety, and of how one being's sacrifice can elevate an entire species. In the earliest days of creation, when the world was young and humans were little more than clever animals, they lived in cold darkness, eating raw meat, dwelling in caves, and dying young from exposure and predators. The gods, comfortable in their divine luxury, saw no reason to improve the mortal condition. Humans were meant to serve, not to thrive. But Prometheus, alone among the divine beings, looked upon humanity with compassion rather than contempt. He saw their potential for greatness, their capacity for art, science, medicine, and wisdom. He understood that with the right tools, mortals could become partners with the divine rather than mere servants. All they needed was fire, the sacred flame that belonged exclusively to the gods. Zeus, king of Olympus, had explicitly forbidden sharing divine fire with mortals. The punishment for such defiance would be beyond mortal comprehension, eternal suffering designed to make the transgressor regret their choice for all eternity. Yet Prometheus looked at shivering humanity and made a choice that would echo through all of history. Tonight, you will witness how one divine being's decision to place service above safety changed the course of civilization itself. You will understand why true leadership sometimes requires defying unjust authority, and why the greatest sacrifices are made not for personal gain, but for the elevation of others. Settle deeply into your bed. Close your eyes. Let your breathing slow and deepen. Tonight, we learn that the highest form of strength is not the power to dominate others, but the courage to serve them, even when the cost is everything we hold dear. Be calm, be clear, be dangerous. Take 3 deep breaths with me now, feeling your heart opening to understand the profound joy that comes from serving something greater than yourself. In through your nose, hold for a moment, and release slowly through your mouth, letting go of any fear about the cost of doing what is right. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears, releasing any tension about standing up for others or challenging unjust authority. Your jaw relaxes, your forehead smooths, and your eyes grow heavy with the wisdom that comes from understanding true leadership. the kind that serves rather than dominates, that lifts others up rather than seeking personal elevation. Starting from the crown of your head, imagine a warm, golden flame beginning to flow down through your body. This is not the fire of destruction, but the sacred fire of service, the same flame that Prometheus carried to humanity. Feel it flowing down your forehead, relaxing every muscle, teaching you that true strength comes not from what we can take, but from what we are willing to give. A golden flame of service moves down your neck and shoulders, releasing any selfishness or fear about putting others' needs before your own comfort. Your arms grow heavy and relaxed, sinking deeper into the mattress, understanding that true fulfillment comes not from what we accomplish for ourselves, but from how we elevate others. Your chest rises and falls in a natural, peaceful rhythm. Each breath brings you deeper into the joy of service, the satisfaction of meaningful sacrifice. Feel the warm flame flowing down through your torso, relaxing your back, your abdomen, releasing any resentment about the cost of doing right or standing up for others. You are safe here in this moment. You are protected by the understanding that a life spent in service to others is never a life wasted, regardless of the personal cost. The sacred flame continues down through your hips and thighs, warming every muscle, teaching you that courage is not the absence of fear about consequences, but the willingness to act righteously despite the cost. Your legs grow heavy, sinking into the bed like a hero who has completed a great service and can finally rest in the knowledge of good accomplished. Down through your calves and feet, the golden flame of noble purpose completes its journey, leaving you completely relaxed, completely at peace, completely ready to witness how one being's sacrifice for humanity became the foundation for all human civilization, art, science, and progress. Your mind grows quiet and receptive, like the sacred grove where heaven and earth meet in the service of something greater than either alone. You are ready for whatever wisdom this ancient tale will bring to your understanding of service, sacrifice, and the profound joy that comes from elevating others. You are grounded in this moment, yet open to the transformative story of divine defiance in service to humanity, of choosing eternal suffering rather than allowing others to remain in darkness. You are safe. You are noble. You are ready to learn how true leadership serves rather than dominates, how real strength protects rather than exploits, and how the greatest gifts often require the greatest sacrifices. Breathe deeply and let the tale of Prometheus begin to unfold. knowing that within every story of service lies the seed of nobility, and within every act of sacrifice for others, the flame of divine purpose burns eternal and bright. In the age when gods walked freely between realms and mortals were barely more advanced than the beasts of the field, most divine beings viewed humanity with either indifference or disdain. To the Olympians, humans were useful for sacrifices and worship, but hardly worthy of genuine concern or elevation. Prometheus stood apart from this divine arrogance. Unlike his fellow titans and the newer generation of Olympian gods, he possessed what the Greeks called philanthropia, love of mankind. When other immortals saw humans as amusing pets or useful servants, Prometheus saw potential for greatness that even the gods had not yet imagined. He would spend long hours invisible among human settlements, watching families huddle together for warmth in caves, seeing mothers lose children to diseases that simple heat could prevent, observing brilliant minds trapped in ignorance for lack of the tools that divine fire could provide. While other gods enjoyed their nectar and ambrosia in the luxury of Olympus, Prometheus felt each human death from cold as a personal tragedy. The Titan understood something that escaped his divine brethren, that humans possessed a spark of creativity, curiosity, and moral reasoning that, properly kindled, could elevate them to heights unknown. They had the capacity for art that could rival divine beauty, for healing knowledge that could challenge death itself, for architectural achievements that could reach toward heaven, and for philosophical insights that could illuminate the very nature of existence. But all of this potential remained locked away by a single limitation: the absence of fire. Without the sacred flame, humans could not forge metals, could not cook food properly, could not create light to extend their productive hours, could not develop the technologies that would unlock their true capabilities. Fire was the key to everything: to medicine, to metallurgy, to cooking, to light, to warmth, to the foundational technologies upon which all human civilization would be built. Yet Zeus had decreed that fire belonged exclusively to the divine realm, and any god who shared it with mortals would face punishment beyond comprehension. Prometheus faced an impossible choice: obey divine law and watch humanity remain trapped in primitive suffering, or defy the King of Gods and face eternal torment for the sake of beings who could never adequately repay such a sacrifice. In the great hall of Olympus, where marble columns reached toward infinite sky and golden light reflected the glory of divine authority, Zeus had made his position unmistakably clear. The sacred fire that burned eternally in the divine realm was not to be shared with mortals under any circumstances whatsoever. Fire is the fundamental force that separates divine from mortal, the King of Gods declared to the assembled immortals. It is the source of technology, of civilization, of power that could elevate humans beyond their intended station. They are meant to serve, to worship, to acknowledge their inferior position in the cosmic order. Give them fire, and they will begin to think themselves equal to gods. Zeus's concern was not entirely without basis. Fire would indeed transform humanity from primitive worshippers into active creators. With the sacred flame, mortals would develop medicine that could extend life, weapons that could challenge divine supremacy, and knowledge that could question divine authority. The comfortable relationship between superior gods and inferior mortals would be forever altered. The other Olympians nodded their agreement, comfortable in their divine luxury and seeing no reason to complicate the established order. Humans served their purposes adequately as they were, providing sacrifices, building temples, and acknowledging divine superiority. Why risk changing a system that worked so well for the gods? But Zeus went further than simply forbidding the sharing of fire. He established a punishment so severe that it would deter any immortal from even considering such defiance. Any divine being who gave fire to mortals would be chained to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains, where an eagle would come daily to tear out their liver, which would regenerate each night only to be torn out again the following day. This punishment would continue for eternity, with no possibility of reprieve or parole. The assembled gods understood the message clearly. Zeus would tolerate no challenge to divine supremacy, no act of compassion that might elevate mortals beyond their designated role. The cosmic order was fixed, the hierarchy was absolute, and any attempt to improve the mortal condition would be met with punishment, designed to make the transgressor eternally regret their choice. Prometheus listened to this decree with growing resolve rather than growing fear. The greater the threatened punishment, the more clearly he understood that Zeus recognized the transformative power of fire, and the more convinced he became that humanity deserved access to their full potential, regardless of the personal cost to himself. Alone in his divine dwelling, Prometheus wrestled with the most significant choice any being could face: the decision between personal safety and service to others, between comfortable obedience and principled defiance, between preserving himself and elevating humanity. He could see both paths clearly before him. The path of obedience was comfortable, safe, and aligned with divine authority. He could continue his immortal existence in peace, enjoying the pleasures of divine life while humans continued their struggle in cold darkness. No one would blame him for choosing safety over sacrifice. Even mortals themselves, if they knew of his dilemma, might tell him not to risk eternal suffering for their sake. But the path of service called to him with a voice that grew stronger with each passing day. Every night, he watched human children die from cold that fire could prevent. Every day, he saw brilliant human minds trapped in ignorance that the technologies of fire could illuminate. Every moment, he witnessed the vast gulf between human potential and human reality, a gap that could be bridged by a single act of divine defiance. Prometheus understood that this was not merely about fire, but about the fundamental question of what the gods owed to their creation. Had Zeus and the Olympians created humans simply as eternal servants? Or had they brought forth beings capable of growth, wisdom, and partnership with the divine? Was the cosmic order a fixed hierarchy that must never change? Or was it an evolving relationship that could grow into something more beautiful? The Titan also recognized that Zeus's threatened punishment revealed the king of gods' deep fear of human potential. If fire were truly insignificant, if humans were truly incapable of divine-like achievements, why would sharing the sacred flame require such severe punishment? The very extremity of the threatened consequences proved that Zeus understood fire's transformative power and feared what humanity might become. As dawn broke over the divine realm, Prometheus made his choice. He would accept eternal suffering rather than allow humanity to remain trapped in preventable limitation. He would choose service over safety, principle over comfort, love over law. The decision once made filled him not with dread, but with profound peace. The peace that comes from aligning one's actions with one's deepest values, regardless of the cost. In the sacred temple of Hephaestus, where divine fire burned eternal and pure, Prometheus approached his destiny. This was no common theft driven by greed or malice, but a sacred mission undertaken for the elevation of an entire species. The Titan moved with the reverence of a priest performing the holiest of rituals. For in truth, that is exactly what he was doing. The sacred fire blazed before him, contained within a brazier of celestial bronze that had burned continuously since the creation of the world. This flame was the source of all divine power, the essence from which gods drew their ability to create, to heal, to transform, and to illuminate. It was the most precious substance in existence, and Zeus guarded it more carefully than his own life. Prometheus had come prepared for this moment. In his hands he carried a hollow fennel stalk, dried and prepared specifically to carry the sacred flame without being consumed by it. This simple reed would become the most important container in the history of both divine and mortal realms, for it would carry the gift that would transform humanity forever. As he approached the eternal flame, Prometheus felt the weight of his choice settling upon him like a mantle of both honor and doom. He knew that the moment he touched the fennel stalk to that sacred fire, there would be no turning back. Zeus would discover the theft, the punishment would be inevitable, and eternity would become a daily cycle of agony and regeneration. Yet he also knew that the flame he was about to steal would kindle the forge fires that would create the Bronze Age. It would light the cooking fires that would improve human nutrition and health. It would burn in the lamps that would extend productive hours and enable the development of art, literature, and philosophy. It would warm the homes where human families could gather in safety and comfort. Most importantly, it would spark the curiosity and creativity that would drive all future human achievement. Medicine, architecture, agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, and countless discoveries yet to be made. This single flame would become the mother of all human civilization. With steady hands and unwavering resolve, Prometheus touched the fennel stalk to the sacred fire. The flame leaped eagerly into its new container, as if it too understood the momentous nature of this gift to humanity. When Prometheus descended from Olympus carrying the sacred flame, the mortal world held its breath in anticipation of transformation it could not yet comprehend. The Titan appeared among humans like dawn itself, carrying light that would banish not just physical darkness, but the darkness of ignorance, cold, and limitation that had defined the human condition. The first mortals to witness the divine fire were struck with wonder that bordered on worship. They had seen lightning, understood that fire existed, but they had never possessed it, never controlled it, never been able to kindle it at will. Now here was flame that would burn continuously, that could be shared from torch to torch, that would never need to be begged from the gods or hoped for from lightning strikes. Prometheus taught them everything: how to build hearths that would contain the fire safely, how to kindle new flames from existing ones, how to use different materials for different purposes. Green wood for slow, smoky fires that would preserve meat, dry hardwood for hot, clean flames perfect for cooking, fine kindling for starting fires quickly, coal and charcoal for the intense heat needed for metalworking. Within days, the transformation of human life was miraculous. Families gathered around hearths for the first time, sharing cooked meals that were not only more nutritious, but brought communities together in ways that had never existed. Children played safely in the warm light of home fires instead of huddling in cold caves. Elders lived longer when protected from cold and provided with warm food. But the changes went far beyond mere comfort. With fire came metallurgy, the ability to forge bronze tools and weapons that made agriculture and construction possible on scales never before imagined. Pottery became achievable, allowing for food storage and cooking techniques that improved nutrition and health. Light extended the productive day, enabling crafts, art, and learning that could only happen when darkness was no longer an absolute barrier. Most profoundly, fire sparked human curiosity about the natural world. If they could control this divine force, what other mysteries could they unlock? What other aspects of existence could they understand, master, and improve? The flame Prometheus brought was not just physical fire, but intellectual fire, the spark of inquiry and innovation that would drive all future human achievement. As Prometheus watched human civilization begin to blossom, he felt a satisfaction deeper than any pleasure his divine existence had ever provided. This was the joy that comes from service perfectly fulfilled, from sacrifice that achieves exactly what it intended, from love expressed through action, regardless of personal cost. It was Helios, god of the sun, who first brought news of the transformation to Zeus. From his daily journey across the sky, Helios could see the countless fires now burning in human settlements. Cooking fires, forge fires, hearth fires, and lamp fires twinkling like falling stars across the mortal world. The change was so dramatic, so unprecedented, that it could mean only one thing. Zeus's rage was immediate and absolute. The king of gods summoned the Olympic Council with thunder that shook the foundations of divine realm itself. When the immortals assembled, They found their leader in a fury unlike any they had witnessed since the war with the Titans. "Someone has defied my explicit command," Zeus declared, his voice carrying the power of earthquakes and hurricanes. "The sacred fire burns now in mortal hands." Humans, who yesterday huddled in caves, now forge bronze weapons and cook elaborate meals. They build permanent settlements and work through the night by lamplight. The cosmic order itself has been overturned by an act of divine treachery. The assembled gods trembled before Zeus's wrath, but none more than those who had always respected Prometheus's compassion for humanity. They knew immediately who had committed this act of ultimate defiance, and they understood that the punishment would be swift, severe, and designed to serve as an eternal warning to any other immortal who might consider similar acts of mercy. Zeus continued his declaration of divine justice. Prometheus has chosen to serve mortals over gods, to elevate humans at the cost of divine authority, to place his personal compassion above cosmic law. He will learn that such choices carry consequences that make temporary mortal suffering seem like divine blessing by comparison. But even as Zeus planned his terrible punishment, reports continued to arrive from the mortal world that only intensified his rage. Humans were not simply using fire for basic survival. They were innovating, experimenting, discovering new applications that even Prometheus had not anticipated. They were developing agriculture that could feed larger populations, metallurgy that created stronger tools, and architecture that built permanent cities. Most infuriating to Zeus, humans were beginning to question why they had been denied fire for so long, why the gods had withheld something so beneficial, whether divine authority was always aligned with cosmic justice. The very questions that Zeus had feared were beginning to emerge, and with them, the beginning of human philosophical inquiry that would eventually challenge the absolute nature of divine rule. The transformation was irreversible, the gift impossible to recall, and the precedent impossible to ignore. Prometheus had succeeded completely in his mission, but now he would pay the price that Zeus had promised. High in the Caucasus Mountains, where wind howled through jagged peaks and no mortal foot had ever trod, Zeus carried out his promised punishment with divine precision designed for maximum suffering. Prometheus was chained to the highest, most exposed rock face with bonds forged by Hephaestus himself, chains that no immortal strength could break, no divine intervention could sever. The chains were not merely physical restraints, but instruments of eternal torment, designed to cause constant pain while preventing any possibility of escape or relief. They bound not just Prometheus's body, but his divine essence, ensuring that he would experience every moment of suffering with the full sensitivity of immortal awareness, unable to fade into unconsciousness or numbness. But the chains were only the beginning of Zeus's punishment. Each day at dawn, a massive eagle, some say the same eagle that carried Zeus's lightning bolts, would arrive at the rocky peak. This divine bird of prey would spend the entire day slowly, methodically tearing out Prometheus's liver, consuming it piece by piece, while the Titan remained conscious and aware of every moment of agony. The liver was chosen specifically because the Greeks believed it to be the seat of regeneration and healing. Each night, Prometheus's liver would grow back completely, restoring him to full health and wholeness, only to ensure that the following day's torment would be as acute as the first. This cycle would continue without variation, without reprieve, without hope of eventual cessation, for all eternity. Yet through all of this unimaginable suffering, Prometheus never expressed regret for his choice. When the eagle tore at his flesh, he did not curse the day he decided to serve humanity. When the chains cut into his divine skin, he did not wish he had chosen obedience over compassion. When the isolation of the mountain peak threatened to drive him to madness, he focused instead on the warming fires he could sometimes see twinkling in human settlements far below. Other immortals, when they dared to visit the site of punishment, were amazed by Prometheus's continued defiance. He spoke not of his own suffering, but of humanity's progress. He found joy not in any prospect of personal relief, but in reports of human achievement. New cities built around permanent hearths, new arts developed in the light of divine fire, new sciences emerging from the leisure that fire-cooked food and fire-warmed homes made possible. "I regret nothing," he would tell his divine visitors. "Every moment of this suffering is justified by every moment of human progress that my gift has made possible. Zeus can torture my body for eternity, but he cannot touch the satisfaction that comes from service perfectly fulfilled." Years turned to decades, decades to centuries, and centuries to millennia, but Prometheus's punishment continued unchanged. Yet something remarkable happened during those eons of suffering. The Titan became not bitter or broken, but increasingly wise about the nature of service, sacrifice, and the relationship between individual conscience and authority. He learned that principled defiance is not rebellion against law itself, but loyalty to a higher law, the law that demands we serve justice even when it conflicts with power, that commands us to elevate others even when it costs us everything. His daily torment became a meditation on the difference between punishment and persecution, between consequence and justice. Prometheus discovered that suffering accepted for the sake of others transforms both the sufferer and those served. His pain became meaningful, not because it was deserved, but because it was chosen consciously for a purpose greater than personal comfort. Every day of agony was also a day when somewhere in the world, a human child lived who would have died without fire. A discovery was made that would have been impossible without divine flame. Most profoundly, he understood that true leadership requires the willingness to pay prices that followers cannot or should not pay. His chains were not just punishment, but privilege. The privilege of ensuring that others could benefit from his sacrifice without bearing its cost. No human would ever need to face Zeus's wrath for possessing fire, because Prometheus had already paid that price for all of them. The Titan also learned that principled stands often inspire others in ways the original actor never anticipated. His example of choosing service over safety, principle over comfort, began to influence other immortals. Stories of his sacrifice spread among both gods and mortals. creating a new understanding of what nobility could mean. Not the nobility of birth or power, but the nobility of conscious choice to serve others, despite personal cost. Even Zeus, though he would never admit it publicly, began to understand that Prometheus's defiance had not weakened divine authority, but had demonstrated its highest potential. True power is not the ability to prevent others from growing, but the wisdom to guide that growth in directions that benefit all. Prometheus had shown that the greatest gods are those who elevate rather than diminish, who serve rather than merely rule. After 30,000 years of daily torment, liberation came not through divine mercy or Zeus's change of heart, but through the heroic action of another being who understood the value of Prometheus's sacrifice. Hercules, the greatest of mortal heroes, arrived at the Caucasus Peak during his famous 12 labors, carrying with him both the strength to break divine chains and the moral authority to challenge even Zeus's decrees. Hercules had grown up in a world transformed by Prometheus's gift. Every cooked meal he had ever eaten, every bronze weapon he had ever wielded, every warm hearth he had ever known existed because of the Titan's sacrifice. The hero understood that he owed not just his achievements, but his very survival to the chained figure before him. "I have come to free you," Hercules declared, "not in defiance of the gods, but in recognition that your punishment has served its purpose. You have proven that service to others is worth any personal cost, that principle matters more than power, and that true nobility comes through sacrifice for those who cannot protect themselves." When Hercules shattered the divine chains with strength blessed by the gods themselves, Prometheus felt not just physical freedom, but vindication of everything he had endured. His liberation had been earned, not through repentance or submission, but through the proof that his service had inspired others to similar acts of courage and nobility. The Titan's first act upon freedom was not to curse Zeus or seek revenge, but to embrace Hercules with gratitude, not for his own liberation, but for proving that the human potential he had glimpsed and served had indeed flourished into heroism worthy of divine recognition. Together they looked down at the human world that had grown from scattered cave-dwelling tribes into magnificent civilizations with art, architecture, literature, medicine, and philosophy that rivaled divine achievements. Cities glowed with the light of countless fires, all descended from that first flame carried in a fennel stalk. "Your sacrifice was not in vain," Hercules told him, and Prometheus smiled with the satisfaction that comes from service perfectly fulfilled, from suffering that achieved exactly what it intended, from love expressed through action and vindicated by results. The story of Prometheus speaks directly to every person who has ever faced the choice between comfortable conformity and principled action, between personal safety and service to others, between following unjust orders and standing up for what is right. His example illuminates the path for anyone called to serve something greater than themselves. In our modern world, we encounter Prometheus's dilemma constantly. Every whistleblower who exposes corruption faces the choice between personal security and public service. every teacher who challenges inadequate systems, every doctor who treats the underserved, every leader who stands up for the powerless faces some version of the same decision that confronted the Titan. Serve others at personal cost or choose safety through silence. The wisdom of Prometheus teaches us that true leadership is not about accumulating power over others, but about using whatever power we have in service to others. The greatest managers are those who develop their teams even when it means those team members might eventually surpass them. The best parents are those who prepare their children for independence, even when letting go is painful. The most noble citizens are those who speak truth to power, even when silence would be easier. Most importantly, Prometheus shows us that suffering for principle transforms both the sufferer and those served. When we choose to pay difficult prices for others' benefit, we discover strength we never knew we possessed. When we accept consequences for standing up for what is right, we inspire others to similar courage. When we choose service over comfort, we find meaning that no personal pleasure could provide. The fire that Prometheus brought to humanity was not just physical flame, but the spark of possibility that ignites whenever someone chooses to elevate others at personal cost. Every act of principled service, every moment of choosing what is right over what is easy, every decision to help others grow even when it costs us something, these are all ways of carrying forward the sacred flame that Prometheus first brought to the world. Remember that your willingness to serve others, to stand up for principles, to choose what is right even when it is difficult, makes you part of Prometheus's eternal legacy, a chain of service that transforms individual sacrifice into collective elevation, personal courage into communal progress. As this profound tale of service and sacrifice settles into your heart, let yourself drift deeper into peaceful rest, knowing that you carry within you the same sacred flame that Prometheus brought to humanity, the flame of service, the fire of principled action, the light of choosing others' good over your own comfort. Sleep now in the knowledge that your willingness to serve others, to stand up for what is right, even when it costs you something, makes you part of an eternal chain of nobility that stretches back to the very foundations of civilization. Every act of service you perform, no matter how small it might seem, carries forward the sacred fire that transforms individual sacrifice into collective progress. Let the gentle sounds of the eternal flame and ancient temple carry you into dreams where service and rest become one, where nobility illuminates every choice, and where you awaken tomorrow more prepared to serve others with both courage and wisdom. Be calm, be clear, be dangerous.